Hello everybody, this is Dawn with Paint and Willow Art, and I have got another paint along video for you today. This one's actually going to be a paint and draw along. We're going to create something like this funky little bird here. It's a bit whimsical. It might seem a little bit childish, but the things we're going to look at in this video, this is just a fun way to do it. We're going to take a look at combining some colors. We're going to take a look at a little bit of abstractness in our drawing, and then we're also going to take a look at using random lines and marks as embellishments for the drawing so that we end up with something really whimsical and fun. We're going to make some dots in the background. I'll show you how to do that. So this one does have a little bit of drawing to it that most of my others have not, but I'm going to show you how to make it simple and easy. So if you don't feel like drawing is your strong skill, you can still create stuff like this, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside and show you what we're going to be working with today. I'm going to be painting on a watercolor block. This one is a Strathmore 400 series 9x12 watercolor block. And what that means is that unlike regular pads of paper where the sheets are loose and they're only bound on one edge, this is actually bound on all four edges with just a little bit of a strip on this side where it's not bound. And what that does, because it's bound all the way around, this takes the place of having to tape your paper to something. So if you have a block, these are really wonderful. I love to work on these. Your paper is still going to warp a little bit, but it's not going to be too terribly bad. If you don't have a watercolor block, just a regular piece of 140-pound watercolor paper will work. Tape it down to a board or whatever surface you're going to work on, because we are going to use a good bit of water on this, so your paper is going to want to warp a little bit. In addition to the paper, I have got my number 8 round brush that I love. I have got some Micron Pigma black pens. I've got 3 of them because I'm not sure which one works. These are all 05 size. You can have a variety of different pens in different sizes for when you do your doodles if you want to, but I like this one for the main drawing of the figure. And the other good part of these pens is that they're waterproof. So we can go ahead and draw at least part of this first if we want to, and then color over it with the watercolors, and it's not gonna make the ink run. And I also have a white, this is a Uniball Sygno white gel pen. This is my favorite white gel pen because it's very, very opaque, so when you're drawing on top of colored things, this keeps a nice white. And then I've got my watercolors as usual. I am using my Josie Lewis set. This one it's one of my favorites because it's really kind of an all-around set. These colors are fairly basic colors, but they mix well with each other. I'm going to pick, I think for this one, 3 different colors for the body of my bird. I'm probably not going to use the same colors I did on this one. I'm going to use some different colors. If you like this color palette in particular, I used a pink, a light blue, and a purple. And I think I stuck a little bit of orange up here and didn't like the way those colors combined. But, I mean, it's not terrible. It just adds a little bit more dimension to it. So you want to pick 3 colors. And you want to make sure that the colors you're picking are colors that are going to mix together well, because we're going to put them on all at the same time, and you can see how the colors kind of blended and ran together. That's what we're going for. So you want to pick colors that are going to work well together. If you're not sure, before you start drawing and doing anything, take a little bit of each of the colors that you're intending to use, and on a test piece of paper, just put a little bit of that color down and put them next to each other and see what they do. So for instance, if I decided I wanted to use a light blue, a light yellow, and maybe a purple, I'm going to put these all down next to each other and see what they do. Now, blue and yellow are fantastic because they're going to make a green where they meet in the middle. So those colors are going to blend just fine. I'm going to zoom you in for a sec so you can see this a little bit better, hopefully. So blue and yellow make a really nice green. And then if I want to take my purple, I'm going to run it along both of them so I can see what it does with both of them, because I might end up with them against each other. The purple and the blue combine together well. Purple and yellow tend to make brown. So you can see as I mix those two together, I've kind of got a yellowy brown there. And I'm hoping, and I'm watching this on my camera, and the colors don't look true on my camera like they do on the paper, but hopefully when I play this back, you'll be able to see those colors. So pick your 3 colors, and if you're not sure if they're going to play well together, just take a scrap piece of paper and put all 3 colors next to each other and see what they do. See how they combine so that you know if they're going to work or not. If you don't like the colors that you end up with when you put these all next to each other, then pick some different colors. Okay? I think for what I'm going to do today, I'm going to use a red, a yellow, and an orange. That's kind of fiery. I might throw a little bit of blue in there. Not that blue though, because that made a mess. That made mud. Maybe pink instead? Yeah, maybe the pink instead. So I'm going to use red, yellow, orange, and I might throw a little bit of pink in there. We'll just have to see how that goes when I get to it. So I'm going to set that sample sheet aside. So for a bird, usually when I do animals like this, I like to draw them in pencil first. I may or may not then go over it in pen before I paint. It just kind of depends on how I feel that day. I think today I will probably do that just because I want to have some good structure with what I'm doing. But I am going to draw it in pencil first. So hang on a second. Let me find a pencil here. There we go. Sorry, should have had a pencil ready. So for this bird, I am going to start essentially with just a circle. And I'm going to draw it really light. And if it's not a perfect circle, I really don't care, because this is supposed to be a bit of a whimsical creature anyway. Okay, so I've got my circle on there. That's the base that I'm starting from, and that just kind of gives me an idea where the rest of my features are going to go. I'm not going to get too terribly fancy with this in terms of structure, including all of the wing detail, everything like that, because we're going whimsical. So I'm going to put a beak on it. And my beak is just an upside down triangle with rounded corners. So draw you an upside down triangle on there, and I know it's kind of hard to see because I'm drawing in pencil. If you get your beak on there and you decide it's not quite big enough, just go around the outside of it and make it a little bit bigger. And you can always come back and erase the smaller one on the inside. So we're not being really too fanatical about getting this drawing right the first time. We're just kind of playing around with it, sketching around a little bit till we get something we like. For the eyes, I'm just going to use big circles. So at the top of my triangle, I'm just going to kind of draw a couple of big circles. I do try and get them fairly even if I can. But you don't have to. If one eye is bigger than the other, it's going to kind of look like he's making a face at you, which is perfectly fine. You can certainly do that. So I've got my beak placed. I've got my eyes. Now, the other thing is kind of take a look at your beak and your eyes relative to your circle and make sure that they're sized the way you want them. If your eyes don't look big enough, which in this case, I don't think my eyes look big enough, I'm going to come back and just go around the outside of them one more time and make them a little bit bigger. So you're just kind of sketching around, playing around with proportions, making it look the way you look. We're not getting all scientific about proportions because, again, this is whimsical. It's not anatomically correct. So we're not really going to worry too terribly much. So there you can see, hopefully, my eyes are a little bit bigger, so I think those go better with the beak now. The other thing we're going to do is give us some wings down here on the side. And a really easy way to do that is just make some really long U's. So I'm going to start about right here And I should probably make my circle darker so you can see. Hopefully that helps. So I'm going to start kind of, if you need a landmark where your beak comes down right here, just kind of come straight off of that. And I'm going to make some long U's. And I'm going to make them come just past the edge of my circle a little bit. And I'm going to make them move up with that circle. So I get something like that. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, we're not going for anatomically correct. We're just going for basic shape. Okay? So then I would come back and I would erase the lines from my circle because I don't want those going through my wings. So there we go. I have basics of a bird, right? Now the other thing I need to decide is what I want the outside of my circle to look like. And you'll notice on this one, it's pretty much just a circle all the way around, except I gave it a little bit of hair up here at the top. And all I did at the top was just kind of make some little spikies off the top. I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. So I think the easiest way to show you is to do that with my pen. So I'm going to go ahead and outline some of this to start with. I'm going to outline my beak and my eyes. And I'm not being terribly careful to make sure I get exactly on my pencil lines. I want this to be a little bit wonky. So hopefully you can see my eyeballs are not exactly circular. They're a little bit wonky, that's fine. I'm going to come in and draw in my wings. Both sides. There we go. Now, the outside of my bird, on this one, I don't want it to be round like I did on the other one. I want it to look kind of like it's frazzled and its feathers are all over the place. So I'm going to kind of just start up outlining it, and then I'm going to do something like this. And then I'm going to go up some more. And I'm just going to do that periodically. All I'm doing is making like V shapes and straight line marks. And when I paint this in, I'm going to run the paint clear up into those and even out of them a little bit so that he looks like he's just really kind of, what? And I'm going to do that same thing down along the bottom as well. There's really no rhyme or reason to the marks I'm making. I'm just making scribbles. So there we go. Okay? Now, before I paint, I am going to come back and I'm going to erase any of the pencil lines that are showing, because once you paint over pencil lines with watercolor, it's really hard to get them out. You often can't erase them. The watercolor seems to seal them to the page. So I'm going to come back and just run my eraser over all of my pen marks so that I don't have any pencil lines showing at all. Okay, so my bird is ready to start painting. I mentioned we're going to use a good bit of water, so the first thing I'm going to do is cover my whole bird with water. So I'm just going to paint in water all over the whole bird except for the eyes and the beak. Leave the eyes and the beak dry because we're going to do something different with those. So this is just going to get us the first layer of color. And if you've watched my other videos, you know what we're going for here is just kind of a thin coat of water on the paper so that it gives it just a little bit of a shiny sheen. And I'll show you that sheen here in just a second as soon as I get all my water on. If you've not watched any of my videos or any other watercolor videos where they put the water down first, it's called a wet on wet technique. You're essentially just painting the water wherever you want the paint to be. So we're basically giving it a base coat of water. And what that does is it allows the paint to float on the paper rather than sink into the paper real quick. And what that's going to do is give us the look of the paints bleeding into each other and mingling together and the colors mixing. Okay. If it feels like it's drying pretty fast, just kind of take a look at it and go back over any of those dry spots real quick with a little bit more water. So hopefully you can see that little sheen on the paper there. That's what we're going for. It's not sopping wet. It's not going to drip when I pick it up. It's just a little bit of a sheen on the paper that's going to let the paint float. So at this point, without really any rhyme or reason, I'm going to start with one of the colors that I chose, and I'm just going to kind of put it here and there on the paper. And remember I said where my lines are up here, I'm going to take the paint clear up there and I'm going to kind of go out of the lines a little bit too. We're wanting this guy to be pretty whimsical, so with whimsical there's really no rhyme or reason. Okay, so there's my first color. It's all still wet, so when I come in with my next color, which is I'm going to use red, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just kind of splopping this color on. I am really not terribly worried if I go out of the lines because, again, whimsical, it doesn't have to be exact. So this red is pretty vibrant. So I'm just taking my brush and wiping it around to kind of smooth it down a little bit. And you can see how that's starting to blend a little bit and give me an orange in the meantime. And I kind of like the orange that that's turning into, so I don't know that I'm actually going to use an orange paint with this. I might just use the red and yellow because it's creating an orange that I like. I had thought I would use the orange just for a third color of interest, but I like the third color that this is creating. So I'm going to go back and get a little more red. And again, I'm just scrubbing it around with the brush. I'm not really being too careful, other than I'm trying not to get it in the eyes or in the nose. If I'm going out of the lines a little bit, it's okay. And I am deliberately going out of the lines up here where my scribbles are. So you're just kind of scrubbing and rubbing the paint around, and as you do that, that paint's going to start to blend. You can see it's all running together over here. I am going to maybe try and throw a little bit of pink in here and see what happens, just for a little bit of interest. And yeah, that's all right. So back to my red. And you're just going to do the whole bird this way. If you need to turn your paper to make it a little bit easier to paint, turn your paper. It doesn't have to stay the same direction the entire time. And this is really quite a, it's really just a loose style of watercolor. It's not terribly exact. And I like this for doing paint-along videos for things like learning how to let the colors bleed together, because you really don't have to be very careful and you're not really going to do it wrong. Okay, so you're just going to continue that whole thing until you get your entire bird filled in. Once you get that done, hit it with the blow dryer. Whoops, before I do that, woohoo, I forgot in between my eyes there. Okay, there we go. So let's hit it with the blow dryer, get it all dry because we need it dry before we do the nose. That way the color we do for the beak, the color we do for the beak doesn't run into the bird itself and make it look weird. So hit it with a blow dryer, get this all dry, and then come back. Okay, we are back. Depending on how wet your paper was to begin with, how much water you had on there, it might take you a couple minutes to get it dry. So if you've come back to this spot and yours isn't dry yet and you need to go dry it some more, pause this and continue with the blow dryer. Remember, on medium heat, not high heat, until you've got it completely dry, because we need it to be dry so that whatever we put here on the beak does not run into the rest of it. Now, at this point when you're looking at yours, if you want the colors to be a little bit more vibrant, you can certainly go back over it and do this exact same thing a second time with those same colors, making sure, like, you know, if you're using the same colors I am, you get your red here and your yellow here. Put your colors in basically the same spot, but just give it a second coat, and that will let your colors be more vibrant. I'm pretty happy with the way this is, and hopefully you can see that when it dried, those colors, the edges of where the colors are, softened really nicely. It didn't leave hard edges, and that's what I wanted. I wanted these colors to all just kind of blend together, so they did that nicely, and that's why we put the water down first. The coat of water first helps facilitate that. Now, when you're looking at yours, you might notice spots like, I don't know if I can get this in there where you can see it. Spots like this up here, where you can see there's maybe a little bit of a harder edge between the two. It kind of looks like the yellow bloomed out into the red, and that's actually what they call it. They call it a bloom. That can happen where you've got more water than in other spots. It just changes the way the colors bleed together. People who are doing really fine watercolor, really realistic looking things, really work hard to avoid the bloom. Because I want this to be whimsical and I want it to be a little bit funky, I'm good with that bloom. So I'm not going to worry about it. In fact, if you like that look, when you're putting your watercolors down, once you get your colors down, you can rinse your brush off and come back with just a wet brush and tap it here and there. And that just puts a little spot of water where you tap it, and it will make more of those blooms. And I really kind of like, in my style of painting, I like the blooms. So it's completely up to you. If you don't like that, you could give this a second coat again to make the colors brighter, but also it would help correct some of that bloom. So for what we're doing today, I like it there. I think it gives it character, so I'm going to leave it there. Next thing I need to do is paint my beak. Why do I keep calling it a nose today? Holy moly. It must be Friday, right? So I'm going to paint my beak, but I want this to be a completely different color than I've already used. And I am going to, I think on mine, paint it a light blue. I don't know if there's any birds with blue beaks. If there are, there's only a couple. I don't honestly care. This is a whimsical bird. It's in my imagination. So its pieces parts can be any color I want them to be. And I want this one to be blue. So I've just gone in, you'll notice I did not put any water on the beak first. I just wet my brush, went straight to my pan, got a little bit of blue paint, and put it straight on the paper. That's a wet on dry technique, and hopefully you'll notice when you do this that the paint moves differently. Because it doesn't have that bit of water there, it doesn't flow quite as easily, which is perfectly fine. This isn't a big area, and I'm not going for anything real particular. If you want to see the bloom effect, you can do it on the beak. It'll give the beak a little bit of texture. After you've got your paint down, rinse your brush off and come back with just water on your brush and just tap it here and there. So we're just leaving little dots of water on it. And hopefully you can see what that did. You can see those little dots where I tapped my brush. Tap your brush in whatever configuration you want. As those dry, they're going to kind of spread just a little bit, and when it dries, it makes it look a little bit textured. Now, the other thing I'm going to do on mine, you don't have to do this, but if you want to, you certainly can. I grabbed a little bit of a darker blue, and I'm going to come in and just kind of tap and lightly wipe a darker blue right across the top of the beak. Because it's wet when I do this, that darker blue is going to kind of spread out and bleed into the lighter blue, and it just gives it a little bit of almost a shadow line look. So it gives it a little bit of dimension. So at this point, you've got your beak done. Hit this with the blow dryer, get the beak dry. So I'm going to dry mine. I'll be right back. All right. Everything's good and dry. So you should have a bird that looks something like this, and hopefully you can see on the beak there where I put those dots of water, you can see the bloom lines right here. So it just gives it a little bit of a textured look, and I've got a little bit of a darker line right across the top where I put that darker blue. I did the same thing on this little one. Its beak is yellow. I didn't put the blooms in the beak, but I did put orange right across the top. So you can see I've kind of got an orange gradiating down into the yellow. Just gives it a little bit of interest. So our bird is basically done for the color part at this point. What we have to do now is add all of our doodles and all of the interesting things to it. So this one, you can see, just has all kinds of random doodles. There really is no rhyme or reason to any of this. It's completely what you want to put on here. And this part is often what freaks people out the most, because you sit down and you look at this and you go, oh, what am I going to draw? I have no idea. Make it easy on yourself. Instead of really thinking really hard about this, use basic shapes to start with. The other thing I want you to notice real quick is that we have not done anything with the eyes yet. I'm going to leave those to the last because I want you to see the effect eyes have on the rest of your drawing. So for here, I'm just going to start with making random marks here and there, and they do not have to stay inside the framework of the bird. You can have things coming out if you want to. I think maybe up here, I'm going to give it some stars. So I'm just going to go in and draw a couple of stars up here, color them in. Need to take my glasses off, can't see. And then I'm just going to give little wigglies down to the top of its head. Okay. Do something with your wings. Maybe with your wings you want to do something like just a bunch of little U's. Again, basic shapes. We're not doing anything really complicated. So I'm just going to repeat little U shapes over and over and over and over and over again on my wings. And maybe you want your wings to have a little bit of differentiation in them, so you're going to do the U shapes on the two outside, what would be feathers, I guess. Do those U shapes, and you can make them random. They don't have to line up. So you've got my U shapes there on my feathers, and I'm going to do just straight lines on the other one. There we go. So part of what I want you to see while you're doing this is that even though we're using basic shapes and nothing terribly complicated in these doodles, the more of them you add, the better looking it gets. For some reason with doodles, if we had just done like U's on this feather and left everything alone, this is going to look really strange because it's just like these random marks. But the more of those random marks you put together, the better it starts to look. So even, I mean, I like how this wing looks where I've used the U's on the outside and straight lines on the middle. Those shapes really don't go together, but when you get them all next to each other, for me, that works. So do the same thing on your other wing. If you don't want to use U's, you could use like V's, you could use W's, you could use little squigglies, whatever you want to do. Whatever shape basic mark makes you happy, that's what you're going to use. So I'm doing the same thing on my other two wings. And I'm not being really careful about it. They don't have to be exact. It looks better if they're not exact. We're wanting this to be whimsical, and part of whimsical is that things are a little bit messy. And I don't know about you guys, but I have, for most of my career, worked in fairly linear, logical jobs, accounting and finance. So for me, this is an exercise in creativity because I want things to line up. My brain wants them to be neatly in a row and neatly lined up and everything in its place. And whimsical is not that. And that's part of the reason I love doing these drawings, because it makes my brain step out of that logical linear line. It opens the door for creative thought. So we're not worrying about these being perfect, perfectly aligned, perfectly in order. You want them to be a little bit wonky. Okay? So I'm going to speed this up a little bit just because we could spend a lot of time drawing, but essentially you're just going to do basically that same thing all over your bird wherever it makes you happy. If you want to put some squiggly lines up here to make it look like it has a little bit of hair or something, put some squiggly lines up there. Don't ignore your beak and your eyes. You can do things like ring your eyes with shapes. So if I go in and create a border around my eyes, and you can either do it inside the eye or you can do it outside on the color part. Whoops. Really doesn't matter. And then maybe I'm just going to make marks like this around my eyes. Again, I'm not being very careful with these marks. They're not precise, they're not exact. Because it's whimsical, I don't want them to be. If I go out of the lines a little bit, that's perfectly okay. So now, all of a sudden, I look a little bit more like an owl than a bird. And that's okay. That's the whole point. This thing's going to kind of evolve as you go and as you do things. So you're just going to add whatever you want to it. Let me show you this one again as an example. This one has all kinds of stuff on it. I have some squiggles up at the top here. I have some stars coming out off the top of the bird there and there. I did some cross hatching here behind the wings to make it look shaded a little bit. You can see what I did with the eye on this one, right? Has flowers across the bottom. This one I did in August, so I gave him a little Leo sign because he was born in August. So you're just going to add all kinds of basic shapes and marks to your bird wherever it makes you happy. Don't worry about the eyes right now. We're going to come back and do the eyes in a minute, but do leave space in here to put what would be a pupil. Okay, so I wouldn't get too carried away inside the eyes. If you want to do more to the eyes, I would do them outside here. Okay, so I'm going to speed up while I draw. You guys draw on yours if you want to watch what I do first and then come back and do yours. You know, this is video, so you can pause it and stop it and start it wherever you want to. So I'm going to speed us up here for a minute, and then we will come back and do the eyes, and I will show you how to do the splatters around it. Okay. Okay, so I've got a pretty good quantity of marks on here. I don't know that I'm going to do too much more on mine. You can do as much on yours as you want to. I often find that more is more where doodle things are concerned, but I'm going to stop here on mine for right now. Once I get the legs and the eyes in, I might change my mind and go back and do a little bit more. Oh, actually, I am going to do some on the beak because I wanted to show you the white on there. So far I've just been using a black pen. And I've been using the same Micron that I used to dry it with. It's a Pigma Micron 05 pen. As you're doing this, though, you can certainly use thicker pens or thinner pens if you want to vary your line thicknesses. Absolutely do that if you've got different thicknesses of pens. But I do want to show you this white pen on the beak because the beak is fairly dark. So I think on the beak, I'm going to put some squiggles across the top. I'll hold this up for you in just a second so you can see the white against that blue. And I'm going to put some dots. There we go. So you can see what that looks like on the beak. That white pen is a really nice white pen. And again, it's a Uniball Sygno white gel pen. So we've got that. We need to do the legs. We need to finish the eyes. And you can see right now, I don't know, I think it's looking pretty cute, but it's missing something with those eyes, right? Right. So we'll do the eyes here in just a second. For the legs, again, because it's whimsical, I'm not doing anything terribly, terribly complicated. I'm just going to come down here at the bottom and draw out some legs and put 3 little forks off the end of it for feet. And you can make this as big or as small, as short or as tall as you want to. And if you want to make the lines for the legs a little bit wiggly, do that as well. So there it's got legs. Now for the eyes, I'm going to come in and put pupils at the bottom of each of these eyeballs. So I'm just going to come in and put a circle-ish, doesn't have to be perfect, in each eye. That's going to be my pupil. That is a fairly big space to color in for this really thin pen. So I'm going to grab a thicker pen. I'm going to use a thicker Sharpie to color the eyeballs in. You can certainly do it with whatever pen you want to. It will just take forever to do it with that little tiny pen. So go ahead and do the same thing on yours. Put a little circle at the bottom of the eye. That will be the pupil. Color it in. Now I'm doing mine with a black pen just because I like the look of black doodles on color. There is certainly no reason you couldn't do this with a different colored pen. You could make the eyes green or blue. You can do it however you want to do it. If you wanted to use watercolor to do this part, you know, draw the circle and then color it in with watercolor, certainly you could do that too. It's all fair game. You get to decide how you want it to look. For me, this is the look I like. So you can see already that's better with the eyeballs, right? It gives it a little bit of life. There's something about the eyeballs that just adds that spark of life to it. But we're not done yet. Because those eyeballs are a little bit flat, I want to make sure that we have a lot of life in these eyeballs. So I'm going to come back with my white pen and just put a white dot right in the middle. Now my eyeballs have some life, yeah? You think? Makes a huge difference, doesn't it? Okay, so my doodles are done at this point. I've got the color on the way I want it. The last thing I'm going to do to this is, like I did on my original, I'm going to add some splatters around the outside of it. And I'm not going to worry, you can see I've got some of the splatters on the bird itself. I'm not going to worry if I get my splatters on the bird because that's all part of the whole whimsical idea of this. So what color are you going to use for your splatters? Whatever color you want to. I think I'm going to use some blue and some purple and maybe some pink for my splatters. So how I'm going to do that is, you could mix it on a palette if you want to. I'm going to do it directly in my watercolor pan. I'm just putting water in the top of that paint and making it real liquidy. And I'm going to just pick some of that up on my brush. And then I'm going to come over the top, and I've got a good bit of water and paint on that brush. I'm just going to come over the top and tap my brush wherever I want those splatters to be. The more water and paint you have on your brush, the bigger your splatters are going to be. When you start to run out, your splatters are going to get smaller. So you may have to go back and pick up some more paint. and that's perfectly fine. I usually like to do a couple of colors of splatters just because it adds interest. So I'm going to do, I think I'm going to do some green ones. So I'm going to do the same thing, just in my watercolor pan over here. I'm putting a bunch of water in the top, so it's really watery. Swiping my brush around to get the paint mixed up, and I'm coming back with just a boatload of water and paint on my brush. And I'm going to splatter it. There we go. And I'm going to do that one more time. I decided I'm going to use a different blue instead of the purple. And that's the fun of this. You get to decide whatever colors you want to use. So there we go. Now I'm going to let that sit and dry before I do anything else because those splatters are really, really wet. So if you want to, you can go hit this with a blow dryer. And I will finish this up in just a second. Okay, so I am back. All of my dots are dry. What I want to show you on the dots real quick is kind of cool where we splattered that paint. When you first splatter the paint, they're like nice round bubbles on the paper, but as you dry them, those bubbles kind of spread out as they soak into the paper, and I really kind of like that look. They get almost a little starburst effect on some of them. So there we go. We're essentially done. Remember to sign your painting. I like to always date mine as well so I know when I did it. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of a close-up so you can see the doodles that I used on mine and that they really are nothing complicated. We did the wings together, so just using lines. I did a little bit of a crosshatch here again like I did on the other one, which is just straight lines one way and then straight lines crossing them. I got my stars hanging off the top. Some little scribbles up here. I did put eyelashes on mine, so again, they're just curvy lines on either side of the eye. This is just a whole bunch of circles together. Some more cross hatching. I just made some lines below the eyes and the beak. You already saw what I did on the beak, and then down here are it's just randomness. None of this really goes together. A couple of flowers, some hearts, some dots, but hopefully you can see that when you get them all together on there, they do become kind of a cohesive unit, even though they really mean nothing individually, but all of those doodles together really tie the whole thing together. So for me, that's part of the fun of doodles, is that you can put so much randomness together and you end up with something really, really cute at the end. So with this concept, you can do this with anything. I used the bird just because it's easy to draw, and I figured if some of you watching maybe aren't real confident in your drawing skills, this would be something that's not terribly complicated to draw. But certainly you could do this same concept with anything. You could do it with a heart. You know, go ahead and put doodles all over the heart. You could use a different animal. You could use whatever you want to use. I did forget to tell you when you're doing the splatters to be careful about where you are when you're doing that, because even though we're tapping our finger on the brush right over the top of the paper, it does splatter. I don't know if you can see on my tray here, I've got some white splatters from doing this another day, which is why you will notice the hot mess behind my painting. I have a piece of white butcher paper taped to my table so that when I'm painting, I'm on this and the bulk of my mess goes here. I do sometimes get it on my paints up there, and that's okay. That doesn't really bother me. It's watercolor, so it wipes off fairly easy. But the other nice part of this, doing it on a white piece of paper like this, is that when I want to test colors, I can just test them off to the side, or if I need to wipe my brush off, I can just wipe it off to the side while I'm working. I don't have to have a whole lot of extra supplies, so I'm kind of a fan of this. And then when it gets all full and there's no more room for anything and I'm ready to get rid of it, I just pull it off and put a new piece down. Because it's paper, I can recycle it. Sometimes I do cut pieces off of it and use it in collage art as well, because there's a whole lot of color there. So it kind of does double duty that way. So there you go. There is our funky little doodle bird. Hopefully there were some techniques that you saw as we did this that are kind of fun, things you might want to use again. You certainly don't have to use these specifically on a project like this. The color blending back here is kind of a universal watercolor thing. So you can do that wet on wet, blend your color technique on anything you're watercoloring if you need your colors to blend together. So that's a skill that carries over into other things. If you prefer to just draw and doodle and you don't want to paint at all, you can certainly just draw things and doodle using just these basic shapes. So doodling doesn't have to be anything terribly complicated. And fairly quickly, I know this one was a little bit longer video than some of the others, but still relatively quickly, we ended up with a cute finished piece of art. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, let me know. If you have ideas for future paint-alongs, something you want to see demonstrated, absolutely, please let me know that. I'm happy to do those if there's something specifically you want to learn. Otherwise, I'll just keep coming up with projects and hope you all like them. So let me know if there's something specifically you want to learn. Please also, I would love for you to follow along with me on Instagram. I do have an Instagram and Facebook page. I'm at Painted Willow Art in both, but I'm more active on Instagram than I am on Facebook. So we have a lot of fun on Instagram. And yeah, thanks for joining me. I hope it's a fun project. And it is Friday when I'm filming this, so I don't know when you'll be watching it, but hopefully everybody has a good weekend. If you're watching it during the week, then have a good week. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.